Hope everybody's doing well today. I want to welcome everybody to the Unimpressed Podcast today. And I have a guy calling in from Los Angeles, and he is an author. He is an aspiring writer, Mr. Jason Yamas. Welcome, Jason Yamas, to the Unimpressed Podcast.
Thanks for having me today.
So it's a very interesting tale of your life, being involved in the San Francisco area and being involved in this meth business. Tell me a little bit about what led you down that road.
I was a film producer living in Los Angeles. I had gone to NYU planning to be a filmmaker, hopefully an actor, had big lofty dreams. And I ended up getting bogged down by an Adderall addiction, which is, very common these days. I had never done Adderall. Like a lot of college students will take it to pass their tests and to get through, intensive study weeks. I never did that. I studied acting, so it didn't require that kind of enhancement. But in the early 2010s, I was producing a very intensive project for a famous songwriter who's now passed. We were doing music videos and a documentary and recording original music. And it was just all encompassing and had us traveling to Detroit. And I was basically doing 3 different people's jobs all at once. So somebody offered me Adderall one day when we were on set. And I realized, I can turn my 8-hour day into a 12-hour day very easily by utilizing this stimulant drug. It's prescribed for focus, but really what it is speed. It's not too different from crystal meth, as I came to find out a couple years later. That Adderall addiction ballooned over the course of 2 or 3 years. It went from taking 10 milligrams a day to, toward the end, I was taking 120 milligrams a day, having to drink alcohol and smoke marijuana and take NyQuil just to be able to come down to get a few hours of sleep each night. It really got out of control. And then in early 2016, I had run out of Adderall in a very work-intensive week, and I needed to get through my responsibilities. And I had read an article that was floating around social media that it was a doctor. A doctor had written the article. The intention of the article was to dissuade parents who are prescribing their children prescribed hefty amounts of Adderall. I was trying to dissuade them from utilizing the drug. And to do so, they said, it's pretty much chemically the same thing as crystal meth. So I thought to myself, reading this article, if it's the same as crystal meth, then why don't I just find some crystal meth? Crystal meth might be a difficult thing to find for the average person. Maybe not everybody has their dealer down the street, pushing crystal meth in the corner. But in gay culture, it's actually quite easy. It's been a long problem in gay culture and gay societies going on 4 decades now. There's an epidemic of meth use combined with dangerous sexual behaviors that occurs in the certain facets of the gay community. Knowing that existed, although I had not really explored that, maybe once or twice, just out of curiosity, but I hadn't really submerged myself into this lifestyle. But I knew it was there, so I went on to Grindr, which is a dating app, or more realistically, a hookup app that gay men use. And it's really not very hard to find crystal meth when you go into Grindr. You go in there, people are using different slogan and different emojis and all kinds of different coded language to be able to express that they are either partying with crystal meth or that they are selling crystal meth. So that is how I originally found my way into using crystal meth.
What do you think drives that addiction, the sexual addiction, in the gay community? Because I think a lot of times that type of drug goes hand in hand, right? You think it's just a state of mind? Do you think it's a makeup? What do you think drives that?
I can't speak as a whole. There's no one true answer for everyone. It differs from person to person, but what I have found within myself and within a lot of the folks that I've met that have suffered this addiction It often stems from what I call gay shame. We as gay people have been ostracized by society for decades. It used to be illegal to even express our orientation publicly. People, still to this day, people could be walking down the street holding hands with somebody of the same gender and be attacked. It happens all the time. Of course, those who are suffering the brunt of it at the worst are the trans community now, but anybody in the LGBTQ plus community has experienced that, whether it's being attacked or being yelled at or being name called, or as simple as being kicked out of your house because growing up because you're gay, or losing family members, losing friends. We've been made to feel other and to be told that what we are, who we inherently are, is wrong. And that pain goes pretty deep. For a lot of us, it manifests as internalized homophobia. It doesn't mean that we can turn off who we are. We still are who we are. We're still attracted to the genders that we are attracted to. But we find ourselves hating that and thus unable to perform sexually and to be able to show up in a healthy sexual relationship with our orientation. And taking crystal meth, it really quashes a lot of that disquietude, a lot of the ambivalence and shame. It pushes it to the side and allows people to engage in their sexuality. But what it does is it takes it to the to an excessive point. Most of the utilization of it is within group sex scenarios, orgies, anonymous sexual scenarios, often with people who don't know their limits, and it can become quite violent in these scenarios a lot of the time.
Well, let's walk that back a little bit. All right, I have this thing about understanding your subconscious, which creates your unconscious bias, and then a lot of times this limits people from getting to consciousness. I 100% agree that you are who you are, and I don't know why society doesn't look at it more of in a simple way. It's if you're made a certain way and you have those attractions, then that's what you're attracted to. You can't change that balance, if you will. So when you think about when you mentioned suppression and you're growing up as a kid and some of these narratives in society that come through your parents and so forth, how early of an age do you think that suppression starts? Because what happens is your subconscious, when you're born, you carry some lineage with you when before you get there. And then day one, you're walking through life and your subconscious begins to be programmed. Depending on the vibrations, how heavy those vibrations are and how heavy the suppression is, the negativity, all that stuff is, that creates, when you get out in life, then you get the double source coming back of how you respond to things with your unconscious bias. And how heavy that subconscious is programmed, it really limits people getting to consciousness. When do you think, as a kid, if you know you're gay and you have these tendencies and you have these feelings, but you're being told all these different things, when do you think that really hits somebody that feels that way? What age? When does that suppression start?
It's a good question. It probably differs from person to person. I know for me, it was around 6 or 7 years old. I was attracted to both sexes, both girls and guys, and boys and girls at that age, and remember expressing a desire, to want to kiss a boy on the cheek in elementary school, and being told, no, the boys don't kiss other boys, and it's just as simple as that. And you're being told the very thing that is your impulse, and is you're beginning to learn is your identity. You're being told by your teacher, by your parent, by your church leader, whomever, that no, it's wrong. It's wrong. You cannot do it. You mustn't do it. And I really feel for those who endure further deprogramming or psychological torture to try to reverse their sexual, I guess they would call it proclivities, but what is really just their identity. People that have to undergo that is unthinkable, really. But everybody, to a degree, is experiencing that kind of rejection, that kind of massive societal rejection. Who I am beginning to realize is me, I'm told is not right. So immediately you're questioning everything. Where do I even fit in? Who are my friends? And to this day, 37 years old, published author, about queer topics, I go to the gym, and if I see somebody who I think is attractive, I feel extremely self-conscious to even give them a look that lets them know that. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with giving somebody a look that says, I think that you are a good-looking person. I think you're attractive. I'm interested in you. However, that programming goes so deep, and I'm sure it started for me so young, that it goes that deep that it is still to this day very difficult for me to feel comfortable flirting, if you will, unless I know for sure the person that I'm flirting with shares the same orientation and potentially shares the same affections. It's one thing to be rejected because somebody just doesn't like you, but it's another thing to be rejected because they're not even on the same team.
Yeah. Well, when you're coming out of that position, I'll say, and you're trying to enter life, and you suppress, you're very suppressed and so forth, and you're wanting as much, I would say, empathy and stimulation. I think from a very simple rationale, you can see why you would want extreme stimulation because of the extreme suppression.
You have hit the nail on the head. That is exactly right. We come together, we as meth addicts, me formerly as a active meth addict, and meth and sex. Mind you, the two really do go hand in hand. It is a dual addiction. Not everybody in the world that has a crystal meth addiction has a sex addiction. But more times than not in the gay community, the crystal meth addiction is also a sex addiction. We explore it in excess.
I mean, do you think there's a way to educate that? I mean, because I think the mind is a very, very powerful thing. And if you could start with young people instead of some of the crazy programs they have in the world today, and just looked at things that are like, hey, black or white, do you think there's a way to inject a better narrative to try to help that mindset in the gay community instead of these emotional swings? Because I'm a believer, too, that when you're very, very emotional and you're trying to do something good or trying to help somebody, a lot of times those emotional decisions may not be the right decision. Do you think there's a way to do it better or do it right to try to, to teach people, and make them understand themselves more?
Yeah, I think radical acceptance of whomever somebody is, whether they identify as genderqueer or non-binary or gay or lesbian or whatever their sexual and identities and orientations are, their gender identities are, they need to be accepted from early on. Telling children know who they are. They don't know the details, but they know the essence of who they are. And children need to be believed when they begin to expose things, and then they need to be loved. They need to be held and told, yes, we love you, no matter how you are, no matter who you are. You see these cliche moments on TV shows, right, where the person's so afraid to come out, and they finally do, and the parent wraps them up in a hug and says, "I love you no matter what." And you know what? It's a cliche, sure, but it doesn't happen every time, and it needs to. It needs to happen no matter what who you voted for, no matter what spirituality denomination you believe in. You need to get around all of that and just accept who your child is, no matter what.
Because I think in society, in a way, there's no more narratives left. I think that's why you see some crazy programs and stuff that really doesn't make any sense to me being done. Instead of feeding off what we see as a society and looking at, all right, we run out of narratives, all the bullshit's out in the open. I think if we can learn how to create a new environment with new ideas, right, you eliminate opinions, you start to eliminate controversy. How do we get there? How can we create a new environment for that position and that place? Because I can look at you, good looking guy, And you're talking about that stimulation, having the sex and then the drug stimulation. You probably got big because of your personality. You're probably like, I'm the man of the man, good looking dude. You're the hustler of the hustlers, in the space. So I can see the extra extremities from your standpoint of why you might have been in the position you were in as a major player once you figured it out. That makes sense?
I certainly utilized my charm in that world to feel like I belonged and to be able to take me to the next level of having purpose. That was so much of what my addiction was just trying to find community, trying to find my own tribe, and trying to find purpose. I made crystal meth my entire world. It was the thing that kept me going. It was the thing that I woke up for if I slept at all, and it was the thing that made me money until it didn't. It ultimately became my story, which it still is to a degree. I don't think I'm answering your first part of your question. I think I forgot what your first part of your question was.
I was just interjecting a thought process. I think we've run out of narratives. And I think if we could figure out a way to clean the slate, right, and create a new environment with new ideas, then you can eliminate opinions and controversy. But when you feed off the current environment, that causes a lot of problems.
Yeah, I don't know. What you're saying to me sounds like it could be translated into those that believe, once we get to a certain place of acceptance, like when Obama was elected and people said, okay, well, now we're in a post-racial world, we can move forward. And it was, to me, I found it to be a very, very diluted perspective. No, we're not. Just because we now have a black president does not mean we're in a post-racial world. We need to still grapple with the ways with race relations and how our country was founded around that. And I think the same thing comes to queerness. Just because certain legislation has been passed and DOMA has been overturned, and we have a Pete Buttigieg is the Secretary of Transportation, who's an openly gay man, and transgender folks are winning congressional seats, and things like that are happening, and we think, okay, well, now maybe we can start anew. I don't think we can. I think we have to factor in the history and the abuses and the torture that a lot of minorities have endured for decades, centuries. I think that what you're discussing sounds idyllic, and it sounds utopian, and I love it in theory. I don't know if it's possible.
When I see things that people are capitalizing on, that tells me that they're just capitalizing on a scenario and they don't really give a shit. Okay. When that group or something's out front and trying to capitalize a situation in a way, I don't think that improves anything. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think
so. Now, do you have an example that comes to mind?
Well, it's just like a lot of these corporations jumping on this whole trans thing right now. I'm like what? To me, being a business person, first of all, I don't think it does any good by doing that. I think there's a better way, because if you're making money off a situation, then you're only thinking about making money and you're really not helping solve the problem. Does that make sense? Because that kind of aggravates me a little bit. I don't know the answer to that, but I don't think it's right. You know what I'm saying? I don't know the answer.
We joke in the gay community about how June, every company is all of a sudden rainbow flags this and queer ally that, and it lasts for Pride Month. It's a marketing ploy. July comes around and the flags get taken down, and you don't hear about it again until next year. So yeah, it's an ongoing joke. You'll see memes about it on the internet, but I agree with you that there are a lot of people capitalizing on social issues that need more than just a highlight for a moment for the purpose of making them more money.
Because in a way, I think it makes that position go deeper. It makes it worse. Right. It's dividing more. We're supporting, but in reality, they're really dividing more, and they're out front, with these scenarios. It's almost like if the corporations really wanted to help, if you reversed engineered that thought process and let the community lead their own ideology, right? Instead of being a controlled ideology, you might have more success.
Their capital contributions could be less in marketing and more in supporting groups that support those. Feel free to talk about how you've put money into these goodwill organizations that help queer youth, the homeless queer youth, or something like that. Feel free to say you gave $1 million to that organization, but maybe spend less money putting pride flags on every Absolute bottle that comes out of vodka, during the month of June. So yeah, I think it could be reallocated into more purposeful ways. Sure.
Yeah, because I think too, a lot of these corporations use it as a slant in their political position, which I don't even like talking about politics. But I think I think if you can take a pure source of whatever it is and let that pure source lead its own narrative, then I think you have better results instead of letting someone else control a narrative that may have an agenda based on the narrative for their own benefit.
I feel you.
Let the community lead their own thing. Because if you think about it, has the community ever been able to really lead their own narrative the way they really feel?
Well, that's a case-by-case answer. But I hear where you're coming from with it.
Like collectively, you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
I don't know. I'm a very deep thinker.
I gathered that from this podcast thus far, which I appreciate, which I value. I value. I listened to some excerpts of other podcasts you've done, and I knew that about you coming into this.
When you're in the middle of this world of meth, how did you feel? Did you feel more valued? Did you come depressed? When did you realize you had to get out of it?
I didn't. I'll answer how I felt. I did not find myself feeling depressed that I recall. But I was always high. I would sleep maybe 4 hours a week. And it was only when I would. There's another drug called G that is often done in conjunction with crystal meth at these sex parties, which is a pleasure inductor. It's like it's beyond ecstasy, or I've never done heroin, so I can't speak to the pleasure that one gets from doing heroin. I can't imagine I don't even want to imagine what that is like. But I have done ecstasy and Molly, and let me tell you, G is more pleasurable than either of those. Unfortunately, it has really destructive side effects, whereas if you do too much of it, it's also called the date rape drug sometimes. It's one of the date rape drugs. If you do too much of it, you will pass out without knowing that you are about to pass out. Twice that happened to me while driving rideshare passengers when I was in my early addiction, which is documented in the book. When I taken too much G, they call it falling out because you truly have no idea you're about to pass out. You could be in the middle of a sentence and just gone. You're out. Consciousness slipped away. And I bring up G because that was the only way I ever got to sleep. If I took too much of it, and sometimes I would have a friend who knew I had been up for a week, and the delusions start, and the paranoia starts, and the visuals, the hallucinations begin, the auditory hallucinations too, and they would see that starting to creep in, so they would give me enough G to knock me out, which. It sounds wild. They're overdosing me with a drug just so I'll sleep. In a friendly way, they're overdosing me because they know that I'm going to be even more destructive if I didn't get to sleep. So personally, no, I was not depressed, but I knew people that were, clients that I sold to, friends that I had, because they were just sitting around, waiting for their next hookup, waiting for their next orgy, watching Judge Judy, whatever it may be, just smoking meth all day. And whereas I deluded myself into thinking that I was of massive importance, that I was helping shape how meth was being distributed, and I was going to change the game, and I was going to make it a non-violent industry, and all these grandiose delusions. And moreover, I also told myself I was researching a movie, that when I eventually would get sober and would stop using drugs, that I would write a movie about this world as well. So my participating in all these dangerous and risky activities and criminal activities was only research for a movie that was going to help people and inspire people and uplift people. And so, you tell yourself all kinds of things. At least I tell myself all kinds of things, especially as an active addict. To be able to justify the using and justify the shitty choices I was making. So personally, I never let myself go slow enough to feel what I was really feeling. And crystal meth has an amazing ability to quash whatever negative emotions you're feeling at the time, as does G. So I felt like I was on top of the world for much of the time I was there, until the danger starts creeping in. Car chases and robberies and grifters and guns being shot and held up at my head, and the things that you can't avoid, and you also can't retaliate if you have chosen to be a non-violent criminal, which I swore up and down I would remain, and I did. But I also had everything taken from me. All of my money, all of my drugs, all of my clothes, all of my sanity. By the end, I trusted nobody. I thought either somebody was working for a competitor or working for the feds and the DEA or working for my mother trying to get me into rehab. I trusted nobody. By the end, I had no credit. I had 90 grand in debt. I was a mess. There was this NBC article that went out recently about my travails in San Francisco, and the Twitter comments were really out of control. Thankfully, I didn't respond to any of them, but a lot of them were like, how much money did this guy walk away with? He should be ashamed of himself. Listen, honey, I walked with it took me 5 years to just get back to zero after the debt I walked with. When you are that deep in addiction and you're trying to pull off a mini drug empire and you're that diluted with all the chemicals and the sleep deprivation, you're not getting out of there a rich man. And I certainly did not. I think that answered your question, did it? Probably 20 other questions.
If you're listening out there, the book is Tweaker World, a memoir. What kind of money were you talking about that was flowing through?
So it started in my first few weeks of selling small bags, probably $7,000 a week. Toward the end, 15 to 20 grand a week. But it was only for a month or so where we had hit that type of critical mass. And that was because we were supplying everybody in the queer community. We were supplying the people that sold pounds, ounces, 8 balls, down to grams. People that were shipping it to other locales. Pretty much everybody came out of the woodwork. I was foolish enough to take an offer from a gentleman who had who was my liaison to the Mexican cartel. And I go into the details of this in the book, so I won't really get into too much, but there was 2 competing cartels that were trying to take over the meth market in Northern California, probably all of California. And the cartel that was associated with the people I was working with, they had been stockpiling for a while and had stopped distributing. So when they went back into the market, they could undercut their competitors so drastically that they could take control of the whole market. And it just happened that deluded filmmaker Jason showed up right around that time when they were making that transition. And I happened to meet the supplier that they had installed in San Francisco. And I was his workhorse. I was out hitting the pavement doing the work to build that.
I lived in California, and I call them the boys. I mean, those boys were always with anything 2 minutes away and, 100 different cars around every city in California. You know what I mean? So, if anybody's listening to that, it's a very dynamic world, and it's a little different in California, I think, than anywhere else in the United States.
Also the accessibility, because crystal meth is pretty much all manufactured, cooked, if you will. I'm sure most people have seen Breaking Bad. In Mexico, in these super labs in Mexico, it didn't used to be like that in the 80s and the 90s, but the Mexicans took over the cook in the 90s and the early aughts, as depicted in Breaking Bad. And because it only has to come straight up the freeway to California. The availability, the quantity, the price, it's all much more accessible here. So it is a different climate on the East Coast. You don't hear about meth addicts to that extent. And I mean, that's one of the many reasons I wrote this book, is because it will get to that point. They will distribute it so widely that the prices will drop on the East Coast, and it will become more accessible there, and it will in Canada and these other locales where it's still very expensive. So I'm trying to expose this entire world before it does get out of control, because it's not like crack. You hear crackheads, crack babies, all these terminologies. There's a lot of racial connotation too that I won't get into, but I do a bit in the book. But you picture a crackhead, and they're missing teeth. They're dirty. They're probably unhoused. There's all these visual assumptions that we make when you hear crackhead. Listen, the people doing crystal meth, especially in the queer community, they are your barista. They are your surgeon. They are your mailman. They are fucking everybody. That kind of addiction does not discriminate. And if you force yourself to sleep and you brush your teeth and you eat, listen, crystal meth, you're not going to know somebody's on crystal meth if they're doing the things that they need to do. But I'll tell you, I don't want my surgeon to be high on meth when he's operating on me. Yeah. And you really wouldn't know. So we gotta nip it in the bud before it gets out of control. People ask me, aren't you nervous by confessing to these crimes and everything? Yeah, not nervous. There's a niggling in the back of my brain once in a while that thinks, oh, geez, what if there's a DEA agent with an axe to grind that wants to come? Listen, I'm out here trying to help make their job easy. I'm trying to lessen this epidemic. I was part of it for a year. I regret much of what I did. And I'm out here, instead of just saying I'm sorry, I'm saying, no, here's the full caboodle. Here's the whole thing. Here's how it works. Here's where it's coming from. Here's where it's getting distributed to. And here's how it's going to expand if we don't do something about it soon. And I don't know what the answer is. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not a policy maker, but I can tell you what the best that I can do is shine a light on it. Because, sunlight is always the best disinfectant to start. I'm going to need other people to rally with me, though.
The last name Yamas, and we'll close everything up.
Absolutely.
I think it's been a good conversation, and I think it's some deep info here. Where's the Yamas?
It actually means cheers in Greek. I've never been to Greece yet. I plan on going soon, though. If you're walking around Athens or wherever in Greece and you hear people lift their beer and say and they'll say Yamas, it means cheers. And my family, bless their heart, who I'm sure much of them are very embarrassed with this book coming out. I have a lot of conservative relatives that I've not heard from since the book came out. We're the only Yamas family. So yes, if you know a Yamas out there, they are related to the former crystal meth kingpin of San Francisco. I'm being hyperbolic, calling myself a kingpin, but mostly just
where's mom and dad at?
Dad's retired now down in North Carolina. Mom runs a yoga and wellness center outside of Philadelphia called Awakening Wellness. It's wonderful. If you're ever out there, check out her yoga classes. They're both delightful people. Our relationships used to be more strained when I was using, even before they knew I was using, back, even before Adderall, when I was just using cocaine. I was not the best son back then. Since I've cleaned up it's over 6 years without meth and hard drugs. Our relationships couldn't be better. We talk every day, and they've been exceedingly supportive in me getting my story out there. Nice.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, man, with Tweak a World, a memoir, and hopefully you sell this as a TV show, because I think it's kind of a real-time deal. Has there been anything made about that in the gay community?
So there was a reboot of the show Queer as Folk that came out on Peacock last year that briefly displayed a queer character with a meth addiction, but it didn't dive into the story. Unfortunately, the show didn't get picked up for a second season, although I'm sure they would have explored it more. There really isn't. But our show that I've begun developing will aim to tell the larger story of, that goes back to your very first question. Why? What is it that allures a queer person, a gay person, to this type of addiction or addiction in general? It goes to answering that. What are the traumas and the heartbreak and the agony that these communities have to endure? Different upbringings. Mine was a very privileged upbringing, but that's not the only story I want to tell with the TV show. Yes, that's more of what I tell in the book. With the TV show, I hope to tell more expansive stories about queer addiction.
And maybe if you integrate that stuff we talked about at the beginning about why, like you said, why, and helping people understand why they feel the way they do, they could be very game changer. It could be a game changer. This has been author Jason Yamas. Check out the book Tweak a World, a Memoir, and I'm John Edmonds Cosma, the CEO of Bang Productions.